Yeah, well, you would have liked my father. He was outgoing. He had a positive attitude. He had a genuine interest in people. He was, in fact, a perfect salesman, and that's what he was. I teased him once. I said that he'd been a traveling salesman. My mother was a farmer's daughter, so I guess I was the punchline. He didn't like that. The main thing was, he said he is not a traveling salesman. He was a manufacturer's representative. That was the big thing. And of course, they met while they were both in the Army during the war, Memphis, Tennessee, 2nd Army headquarters. But after the service, he went on the road for a while, and then when I was 6, they bought a store in a small town in Texas, women's clothing store. And like any child of a mom and pop store, I used to spend all my after-school hours and a lot of weekends and everything down there at the store. When I was 13, the cleaning service raised their rates. So my father came home that night and he said, "Congratulations, you've got a job." I didn't mind. At 13, anything that pays money is good. And also, as I found out, the best way to learn about people and human nature is to clean up after them. So I would show up at the store in the evening, and in those days, everybody smoked everywhere. So the first job was to go around with a wastebasket and pick up all the big brown glass ashtrays and dump them in and wipe them out with a paper towel. Then I'd go in back in the alley, and those were the days before trash bags and before dumpsters. So they had this big wire mesh bin, and I would pick up the wastebasket and dump it. And if there was any breeze at all, I'd get half the ashes back in my face. And that taught me all that I needed to know about smoking. Most nights I would also spend part of my time on all fours with a razor blade scraping the gum off the floors, and that taught me everything I needed to know about chewing gum. I never went out with a girl who used either product. And looking back on my first marriage, I probably should have had more criteria than that. That's another story. In any event, while I was cleaning up, across the country, shopping centers were opening up. They were precursors to the shopping malls that came later. But they were taking business away from the small town mom and pop stores. So my father got out of the store and he got into ladies' evening gowns. He didn't like that joke either. But he was once more a manufacturer's representative. And he sold to stores from Virginia down in a crescent all the way to Mississippi. And he'd travel around. And in September of every year, we would sit in front of the TV and watch the Miss America pageant. It was must-watching because he had to look to see which of the girls would be wearing his dresses. And he'd point out which ones had manufactured. We always cheered for the dress. It was much like professional sports where the players come and go and you cheer for the uniform. Our best year was when 6 of the 10 finalists all had our gowns on, and it was like winning the World Cup. It was great. When he wasn't traveling to the stores, he'd go to markets. Now, what a market was when the manufacturers of a particular type of thing, in this case women's clothing, would go to convention centers. They'd all set up booths, all the different salesmen, and then buyers from the region would come to see what the next season's fashions were going to be. So we would go to these places. Our big markets were Charlotte, Atlanta, and Miami. And I got to go with him sometimes. You get there the night before and unpack all the dresses and steam them out, all the wrinkles, and hang them on the rack, and get to bed very late. The next day you get up and work. Dad would also hire a model to wear the dresses. But being Pennsylvania Dutch, he did not just hire a pretty girl to wear the dress. He hired a girl who could also help write orders, so that if he was busy with one buyer, he had another set of hands to help with the other. But she couldn't wear all the dresses at one time anyway. And this is where things got interesting is when he was telling the buyers about a dress, he would go to the rack and take it off, hold the hanger with one hand, put his hand inside to fill out the top with the other, and he would walk it around to show how it moved and how it looked in the light. And he was like a Muppeteer. The salesmen from other booths would come out in the aisle to watch him work. He was that good. It was mesmerizing. But the thing that made him successful was not just the showmanship. It was what he did at home. My mother and he would keep track of every dress that was sold and every reorder from all the stores, so that when he sat down with a buyer, he had charts and graphs, and he could tell them what styles were selling, what colors, what fabrics. Because as he told me, he said, my job is not to sell dresses. My job is to make money for my customers. So I want them to only get what they can sell. He wanted me to go into the business with him, but I just was not that good with people. I knew I'd never measure up. And I think he figured that out too. One time he sat me down, and he said, there are two kinds of people. He said, I know you've heard that before, but you've never heard this. He said, there are important people, and there are people who aren't. He said, the important people are not the ones with the big bank accounts and the fancy cars and their names on the door, not necessarily. He said, because we all know there are small, petty people that also have those things. And he said, that's not what counts anyway, because the only thing we've got in life is our time. It's the only thing you're born with, and when it runs out, none of the rest means a damn. So it's how you spend your time that makes you important. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon. It's the value you give the work you do. If you address the job and you believe it's important, then doing an important thing makes you important. He said, so it doesn't matter if you're a salesman or a housewife or a janitor or whatever you are. And he said, the proof of this is that think about who you would rather work for, or who would you like to have work for you? Who would you rather work with? Someone who believes what they're doing is important, or someone who's doing it for the money? And I didn't go to work. I went into public service eventually. We didn't see each other for a long time. We didn't come home for holidays and stuff. But I did get a call one day, and Dad said he'd been diagnosed with brain cancer, and he asked me to come down with him when he went to see the neurosurgeon. So we went down there, and we saw the surgeon. And I have never believed it does any good to tell a dying person what the odds are with the surgery. It just seems absurd. But so with 1,000 to 1 chance, he decided, he went ahead and took it. I came back down later on, and he only had a few weeks to go at that point. And I came to stay with him. He couldn't talk, he couldn't walk, he could barely swallow. And he had a full-time nurse there in the house. We were sitting at the lunch table one day, and I saw the nurse fussing over him. And I said, you know, you've only met him as a sick old man. I said, but you've never seen the way he worked. He was a salesman, and I told her how he worked and what he did. And, you know, there are tens of thousands of young women out there who got to have their prom night Cinderella dreams come true, in part because of what my father did. And that's important.
Wow.